Oh my God, it worked for the first time I turned it on. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hello from the kitchen.
We've been a little crazy with food.
I'm not mad. I'm not on a fast this week.
I am so happy to have
I am.
Me too.
Like, yes. I get to really come.
And bring the full Serica.
So, ladies, we did not even discuss what we were discussing this week.
We sure didn't. I realized that too when I was like,
But I have an idea, and if not, we can, go with something else. But my idea was, it's October. It's a Domestic Violence Awareness Month.
And I just watched Maid.
And I just watched Maid.
Did
you?
you?
Watched Maid too. Yeah, it was up last night finishing it. It was really good and triggering for some people. Have you watched Maid yet?
Maid.
It's a limited series that is playing on Netflix. It shows a little window into the system and how the system does have some resources, but how it's almost impossible for someone to get out and make it, from that sort of situation. And in this case, the lady was emotionally abused. She wasn't physically abused. So the system makes it even harder for you to prove, something like that. So on the one hand, I get it, because you could just say, oh, he's emotionally abusive because you were vindictive, or, like the liberal use of the word narcissist right now. Everybody's a narcissist. You break up, oh, he's a narcissist, as opposed to the real legitimate issues. So anyway, I just thought I'd put that on the table and see if we wanted to discuss that. And let me get you a drink. What are you drinking?
What do you have?
Well, we have the wines,
We can have
and we have
wine.
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 Okay.
That's
Wine.
just wine.
You wanted to try the blueberry. Are you okay
I
if we
would-
try
Yes.
the blueberry?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, blueberry's my favorite.
Ziggy, you gonna let me get up? I don't know. I might not be able to get up. Look at this.
So I spent you want me to get it? I'm sorry.
I got it. No, it's okay.
I spent the show half wanting to throw things at the TV and throttle her for her bad choices, and the other half wanting to kill him and her father, but also just really thinking about, like, we said this expression, and I use it still, like, they don't know how to be. And given how she was raised and who raised her, it was like she had no chance. She didn't even know how not to act like that.
Mm.
And it was so much about that cycle. And that, you know what I mean? And it was so sad.
Mm-hmm.
And it was funny because Erica had watched it, right? And then I watched one episode with her. And then I said, maybe I'll come back and watch other ones. And then I went home and I streamed like 5 of them. I stayed up till 3 a.m. I couldn't stop. It's short. It's like 10 episodes. And she was like, you watched more? Cheater. I said, well, have you not seen them? She's like, no, I watched all of it. And I said, and you want to see it again? Like, I'm already aggravated from watching it once. I don't know if I want to sit through this again. But it's just this train wreck that you can see coming. And she just can't. And it's hard to watch.
Well, but at the same time, don't you think that with considering what her background is and everything, I thought she, for the most part, made pretty strong choices for her child.
She loved her child, and she knew much better than her mother, right, what her child needed. But the things leading up to that, there were just so many times where I was just cringing. And I was like, no, don't do that. No, don't do that. No,
Well, I didn't want to, when she was getting with the ex, that was.
Oh.
But they say that domestic violence, women who are part of domestic violence or victims of domestic violence, takes them 3 times usually to leave.
Well, I thought that was interesting when the woman that ran the shelter said it took 7 attempts for most people, right? And it took her 5.
Oh, 7 to 10? Oh, I thought it was 3.
It was awful. And I've done a little bit of volunteer work and donating and whatnot for women in distress. And they are, so locked down, just like they are in the series, where nobody can go in or out, nobody, and it's an amazing program, but you think about how thinly supported those organizations are, and the shoestring budgets, and and it's just terrible. And I'll tell you what, the other thing I had a really hard time with was not just becoming enraged at men in general. And I've been seeing these things probably because this month, the awareness month, thank you. Here's a simple solution to stop telling women don't cross the street if you're afraid. Here's to us and food and wine
And the Holy Trinity.
and the Holy Trinity. Let's see how it is. I had tasted it there and I loved it. So
It's super sweet. You probably like Manishwich.
Manischewitz.
Yeah.
Heck yes. But I did bring the Greek wine is dry. And I
Okay.
did think of you.
Okay, no, that's okay. I mean,
What do you think?
I'm fine. It's good.
That's good. I like sweet wine.
I do
I
too.
like sweet wine.
I do too. I really do. The more like Kool-Aid it is, the better. That's just me. We used to go to this winery in New York State, Brotherhood Winery, which has turned itself into some bougie winery now. But at that time, they sold $2 bottles of pink Catawba, and we would go on the tour and buy all the pink Catawba we could afford, and it was amazing.
Right.
Anyway, you read all these things for women, right? Like there's that one now, that meme, every woman I know has crossed the street, gotten out her pepper spray, looked behind her, done all these things that we have to do, instead of being how about men stop acting like this?
Mm-hmm.
And it was very hard when I watched that to not just get so angry all over again.
Mhm.
And I think, despite what people think, right, and the statistics are there, but people ignore them, it's not a socioeconomic issue. It's not a color issue. This crosses everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people like to tell themselves that it doesn't happen to people like them.
Oh no, I think it's definitely across the border.
Oh, I
Everything.
think so, too.
It's everywhere, but if you think about it, so I'm gonna step to the other side a moment, because I think that one of the other things that they did in the series do a good job of portraying is showing that abused children create abuse.
Oh my God, yes,
Even
that
though
cycle.
the protagonist pretty much is going to stop that cycle,
And that's so hard.
But even the husband, who
Her husband.
who victimized her, came from he was so broken. So I guess the question, and we talked about something like this in one of our earlier things, is kind of related to, we are all broken. Do we throw out the baby with the bathwater? And where do we find empathy, and how do we find solutions as opposed to fingers to point? Because he was from a very broken place. Not that she needed to stay there. I don't think that was the situation, but it was very hard for me to watch too and see that this boy was, drinking from the age of 9, and his mother was shooting up or whatever she was doing. So he literally was raised that way and broken, and in his world, in his mind, he didn't hit her, so, how much did he understand? And so I guess the question is, how do we find a solution to this? How do we maintain safe boundaries as women? And let me make a note that the victims of domestic abuse are not only women. Sometimes women are the abuser.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we keep ourselves, all of us, safe? How do we create boundaries? Where do we look in the system, or what system can we create that would support people who were from broken homes, who are, victimizing?
And it's so interesting because
I don't know if we could see if somebody says something.
I have it up here. Let me
you
just
got it.
find where I have it. Thank you. I think I know what I have to do. I kind of don't have it up. Hold on. What I think is so interesting, right, is we we talk about how like we bring our good habits to the next generation, or but
Sometimes.
somehow, but like we kind of expect people to do that, but then we're horrified when they bring the bad things with them, and it's like, well, you can't, you kind of can't separate those things. We bring our experiences with us for good and bad,
Right.
and it's unreasonable to expect that people can bring the good things and just leave the bad behind. That's just hard.
Right.
It's
And-
hard to leave any of it behind.
And sometimes the good things that we bring don't always have the effect that we want, because we dream of being able to provide certain amount of things for our children. We dream of, giving them and helping them and whatever. And then sometimes what we see that what's created is a child who doesn't have the understanding of what it's like to not have. Does that create a lack of empathy? Does it create a sense of entitlement? Does it create, what are we, so I guess my point is that sometimes the good habits that we bring, or the good wishes, because it's not the good habits. If I'm a hard worker and I model that for my daughter, that's a good thing.
Mhm.
But if I have had lack and, or lack of affection, support, whatever, and so I overcompensate with my child. So going back to what you were saying, sometimes those things that we bring are reacting against or overcompensating for
Right.
things that we haven't had. So there's always a balance, I think.
I think there is a balance. It's funny. So I always said when I had kids, right, that my goal was to just make different mistakes than my parents. Because I knew I was going to make mistakes. I just didn't want to make the same ones. And so my mother had this, I think you would call it a phobia of public restrooms. You were never, ever, ever to use a public restroom. I don't know how she did it, but we literally never, ever went into a public bathroom.
You've been to Greece?
So, yeah,
this
talk
is
about
why.
fairy tale. So yeah, makes Calcutta look like a first world country.
It
God.
was.
Yeah, forget about the
with
people
all
who like.
And I would go back in a second, but
Yeah,
it
but
was a very different
Forget
experience
about
for
the
public
people.
bathrooms.
Forget about the people who conceived of democracy and built the Parthenon. Those are not these people. I don't know what happened in 2,000 years, but it's just not them.
I didn't mean to bash Greece, but
Oh no, I can bash Greece. It's a great. No, please feel free.
Culturally,
It is
it
a
is
third
a
world
very
country.
different. No, their bathroom situation is very
Their
different than what we're
entire
accustomed
situation
to.
is ridiculous.
Okay.
But you can
Anyway, I
say
didn't
it.
mean to interrupt.
No, you can say
So
it.
your
It's
mother
okay.
had the phobia
So-
about the bathroom.
So I'm in high school on Color Guard, and we're taking trips to football games 2 hours away on the school bus.
Mhm.
And, getting the 64-ounce bottles of Sprite and throwing vodka in there and drinking all day. So I went to high school when the drinking age was 18, which was a complete shit show because it meant that the effective drinking age was like 15.
Mhm.
Anyway, I would go into a bathroom after hours of this and literally couldn't go. Nothing would come out.
Mhm.
And I would get home with like a bursting bladder. I don't know how I didn't get sick. And I just lived with it. And then I went away to college, which was 90 miles from home. And I'm like, well, I can't go home every time I have to pee.
Mhm.
But it took like 2 weeks. I'd have to wait till there was nobody in that bathroom, that big shared bathroom. I would turn on the water. I would do all these things until I could finally go.
Mhm.
And so I was determined not to raise my children with that fear, right? Because I was going to make different mistakes. So everywhere we went, they stopped and went. Like we would go from Boca to Palmyra, where my mom lived when they were little, and we would stop and use the restroom because I was like determined, right?
Mhm.
So we start. They get older, and we start like going wherever, the zoo or whatever, with my mother. She was like, I don't understand their obsession with public bathrooms. Everywhere we go, your dogs have to use a bathroom. I'm like, yeah, no kidding.
And that's a great example of going the other way.
Exactly. That's what
I
made
mean,
me think of it.
right.
My pendulum just swung so
Right,
far.
right. It's a bathroom. Oh, goody, a public
Yes.
bathroom.
And
Woo!
she was like, I don't understand. And I was like, oh, I understand. I know exactly what this is. But we do kind of do that as well, right? Which
Right.
is not necessarily healthy in whatever the situation is.
Right.
But I think a lot of people, I feel like I was self-aware enough to recognize, right? Everybody makes mistakes, try to make different ones. I'm not sure that a lot of people even recognize that. And that was what I felt so bad for her. The protagonist was, she was so bright and so talented.
Yeah.
And she just didn't have the tools.
But yet she, for the most part, I thought she made pretty good choices. Like she got up and left. She just
Well,
you know,
no, in
she-
the
she
end,
did-
in the end,
no,
yes.
but even before that, I mean, maybe having a party there was not. But
Oh, I
you
was
know,
dying.
I-
So she gets a job, what her service that she works for, this cleaning service, right? Sends her to this house. I would have liked to know, it's very wealthy, gorgeous black woman.
Mhm.
And she's this young white trash girl, right?
Mhm.
And I would have liked to know, they kind of alluded to what she did for a living.
she was an attorney.
Right, which came out later. But anyway, I felt like she was a little less than three-dimensional, and like the whole thing where she made her come back to clean the thing. I felt like there was a little bit of an unclosed circle there with her. But that was me. But anyway.
Yeah, they thought they kind of made it a nice pat thing at the end.
Yes,
her.
which I didn't love. But anyway, she is mean, this woman.
Mhm.
I would have liked to know like what her background was and where she came from.
But even so, it made a very interesting.
Oh, I
gave us
love
an
the
interesting,
setup.
Perspective of the lack of awareness that we have for somebody who is truly suffering, like
Well,
truly
and I-
has
that's
no
a-
money
I
like,
wanted
at all.
Right, I wanted to know,
Can't feed themselves.
I
Can't
wanted
feed their
to
kids,
know,
Can't feed.
did she come from nothing? I wanted to know more about her past and
yeah.
her backstory. I would have been interested in that, but that's me. Because I wanted to know, did she pull herself up by the bootstraps and just forget all of that? Did she always have money? You know what I mean? But so she ends up renting a room in a house from these two women who are a partner. And they're
Spoiler
really-
alerts, by the way, if you guys are
Sorry.
gonna watch this.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm just. I mean,
I'm clueless, I'm
just-
sorry.
Anyway, she has a party. I'm sorry, I totally interrupted you. Go ahead.
No. She's gonna have a party for her daughter's birthday party at the park. Her kid's like 3. And these women say to her, no, have it here. And the minute they said
It's a
that, I
disaster.
was like, don't do that. Like, you do not have the kind of friends who can be in this house.
Mhm.
Or even at their gazebo.
Yeah, it was a disaster.
It was
but
a
anyway.
disaster. But,
Yeah.
you know, she didn't know. Like,
But yet she tried very hard not to be presumptuous or not to take. She I thought was overly unwilling to accept.
I agree, and especially given her background. And it was hard for me to empathize with that kind of thing because I was lucky enough to be raised by people that I knew if I were her with my background and just ended up in that situation, I would have never even considered having anybody over at their house. But she didn't know enough to do that. And it was just so painful because she is so smart and so talented.
Right.
And you're right, no money. And they do these things where she like fantasizes about what they're actually thinking of her, you know, and then words flash. And then, I don't know, she has $100 and then there's a little cash register type thing that goes down and it's like -10, -20, you know, but it's so painful. But what's so distressing, and we know this, but we don't think about it often enough because we're not in the situation, is again, how shoestring and how fragile all these services are for women and men, but mostly women, how hard it is for them to get out of this. It's awful.
So I was sitting here listening as you guys talking because I didn't see it.
Mhm.
I was like, I
Right.
haven't watched
And I'm
it.
sorry, I don't think
Yeah, we
about
should have
that.
just kept it to the domestic.
Sorry.
No,
It's
no,
okay. It's not your
no.
fault.
But I probably will still watch it because I'm curious to see the perspectives. But I'm just listening and it made me realize listening to you guys just how many categories of statistics that I fall into.
Mhm.
Being a domestic violence survivor myself, living in the women in distress
Mhm.
and
Wow.
experiencing it. Like I'm sitting here listening to you all talk about a movie
Mhm.
or show.
And you're thinking, I'd live that
I'm
movie.
thinking like, yeah. And it's good for women to have these conversations who
haven't gone through it
Mhm.
or haven't experienced it. Because even our friends and family who may see us as strong, bright, smart
Mhm.
people, they don't get that can happen.
It can happen to anybody.
Yeah, it can happen. And
To
it's not a for a long time I battled with it being a sign of my weakness.
Yes,
Like
I can
me
see that.
being weak, I let this happen to me.
Yes,
When
that
we
blame.
when we get to the healing side and we start to, take blame, be accountable, shift things where they need to be. It's a battle because, especially having children, and then wanting to let family know, not wanting to let family know,
Yes.
not wanting it to be an issue because in my situation, it started mental. I didn't realize how much mental abuse, or that it even existed for that matter.
Mhm.
But then, the verbal, and it went physical one time and that was enough for me.
Good for you.
But and I say that it's, I battle with it because it's like good for you, and I say that to myself too, and then I think, but that I don't even feel that hit anymore, but I still feel the mental and emotional abuse. I still battle with those things that I went through because those wounds, those scars are just very lasting for women because even if we move on, even when we do move on, we're moving on understanding the collateral damage is your children.
Mhm.
You can't do anything about that.
No. Well, it's
There's
funny, and as I
nothing you
said,
can do about that.
good for you, I cringed at myself
Yeah,
because good for you implies a value judgment.
yeah, and it was the escalation. Like I and it wasn't just that it got physical with me because if it was just me, I probably would have stayed. It got to the point where my children started seeing things. And I mean, I think for me, more than anything, what I see with domestic violence is the desire to be loved and to love. There
And
is
believing in the good in
Yeah.
people, and they're gonna change, and they didn't mean to do it, and a lot of times they don't.
and because we're also protecting that part of us that no one felt of value. Like we're protecting that. We're protecting the
profound.
fact that, I can be ugly around him, or I can they can see me cry, even if they made me cry, they can see it. Because this is already ugly. So this is ugly. This is toxic. This is darkness. So those parts in me that are there, they're here too. Like I'm not a complete victim in it as well because I'm also playing into my own darkness of what I think I deserve from things that I've done, choices I've made. It's
But I think that's always a part of it, because if not, I think a lot more women would be able to leave. But there is, we engage with that, and
But it preys on our own insecurities.
It preys on our
right?
insecurities. It preys on, our sense of worth. It preys on just, there's so much attached to it. That step to leave, you might as well be driving a building behind you. It's such a weight.
Yes, which I love that too.
It is, your beliefs, your hopes, again, your belief in the person, the belief about what you think you deserve, and this is enough for me, or I should be able to deal with this, or I should be able to love them enough so that they'll change. I should be able to, I'm strong enough to get through this, you know. There are, I can't even begin to go through everything, but I do know that it is an amazing feat to be able to take that step, that first step, which is usually the hardest. And the fact that women do it over and over again is amazing.
It is.
Because it's not like the weight gets less, because now then you have to add on, I left before and I came back, I failed, you know. So there's just so many layers to this. So again, I keep going back to, how do we heal this? How do we, what, I mean, obviously the system, there needs to be something in the system, but I'm always a proponent of, it starts with us, and what small things can we do as on our own, either within our relationships or with our
Each of us
relationships with
doing what we
our girlfriends, or our attitudes or our mindset, because a lot of it is again that shift. How do we create a way for access to mental health, or modeling of correct? I mean, what can be done? Because I don't think that sitting here and, you know, saying that the abuser, you know, is all bad is, and it's just their fault, and if we get rid of them, because that's not the case. There was something behind what that person brought, and then there's that human being. Like, again, going back to the example of the thing, you could see that he struggled with it.
He was at his core a good person,
and he wanted
who
to,
couldn't figure
and
out
loved
how to
her,
stop doing
but
that.
it was
Yes.
unhealthy.
Yes.
And this is where I said, you can't throw out a human being. You can say, this relationship is not for me.
Mhm.
And you can remove yourself. And I'm, you know, obviously removing yourself with all the emotional part to it, and then add on the incredible financial thing. You're walking away, even if it's just you, but you have a kid, 2 kids, 4 kids. I mean, oh my gosh, how do you do that?
Yeah, it's really
So how
hard.
do you heal? How do you heal this from within? What can we do?
I mean, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I mean, it's within, and so many variables come into play when we talk about being within, because, you know, my mom's side of the family, we went to church. My dad's side of the family went to church, 2 Baptist, Church of Christ, 2 different, but somewhere along the line, we have to hope and pray that people have foundations built on love, you know, or love being an ingredient of it, even if it's not all love, because there are some people who carry resentment from childhood or something tragic happening to, you know, in my case, I don't want to call him an abuser, because he has his issues too, but I think about what he went through. Growing up, you know, being falsely accused of rape, losing his opportunity to go to college and things, and, you know, just carrying pain. And not just pain from what happened to him, but the pain of what he could have done. And, you know, we hurt people closest to us.
Mm-hmm.
And being in a house with someone, being in a relationship, being laying in bed with someone, those thoughts and feelings come up of the shoulda, coulda, wouldas, or the pain of what happened. and you want to lash out, the person closest to you is
Safe.
that's
That's the thing. We lash out the people we think are safe. That's why
Right.
those conversations, like with your mom, you know, you might be in your head going, why am I talking like this? Why am I doing, you know, sometimes, but it's because it's a safe place. So when my daughter acts like that, she doesn't act like that with anybody else, but she might have an attitude towards me. So what you're saying is absolutely.
yeah. I mean, there's a conversation to be had about how men and women treat each other.
Right.
And that is across any race, economic, all of it is a conversation of how men and women view themselves. Because I mean, I speak mostly even on my social media, I speak mostly to Black people because that's what I've only known. That's who I am.
Well, yeah, we only
So-
speak what we know.
So when I say that the conversation with, you know, getting Black men and Black women to really just have a conversation is hard because everybody is trying to prove the egregiousness that each other has caused each other. Like
Right.
one is, well, you guys did this, where you did this, and what, and
That's
and,
the whole world.
and I get that part. It's everybody, and I see so much. I see so much. Yes, Phil, please. I see so much of that. We're not just allowing each other to see the human in each other. Like not me see you as a woman, or me see you as a man. Me see the human in you. You are human, and that does not have to be tied to anything else other than humanity. That you have a heart, you have blood, you have a soul. You belong to someone. You belong to someone. And there is in that there's responsibility that as humans we take on as women more so because we're natural nurturers. So we want to take care of everybody. You hungry? Want to make sure you eat. We have children. We carry life in us. So it's very hard for us to discard life because we carry life. So men, on the other hand, not so much. They don't have that.
It's funny you say that.
nurturing sense.
I've always said I don't have a nurturing bone in my body.
Again, it's not everybody, no, but our
But mostly
tendency,
true,
our
mostly true.
tendency,
Yeah.
our tendency is.
Yeah, well, no, not everybody, of course, not everybody. And then not to say that, you know, men are, I just think that we gotta really pay attention to the fact that across the board, men and women don't see each other as equals.
Right.
We do not see each other. We don't really, and even women, I'm getting at the point with this feminism where even women are using feminism as a weapon.
Oh, I agree. I totally agree.
Oh,
And I was
yeah.
gonna say, right, we don't see men as humans either. We see men as abusers and brutes
And I think
and idiots and misogynists
And why
and
do we do that?
well, I remember hearing years ago, and I really agree with this. The thing about generalizations is they're generally true, right?
But why do we feel the need to alienate people? Like, why do
No,
we
that's
have
an
to
interesting
be, I mean, why do we have to feel like somebody has to be the bad guy?
The enemy.
The enemy.
well,
and
it
so-
makes our story good.
Well,
Yeah.
I think it
It
also
does.
gives us the courage and the justification to lead, for example,
What
in a
is this
domestic.
goal?
That is that triple cream, and I know,
Is that the orgasm cheese?
yeah.
Goal.
Well, the truffle's on there too. So I wanted to bring in, so what I'm thinking when you're speaking is I think that a lot of women or people feel like they have to be mad or the other person has to be a monster for them to leave.
Yeah.
And I don't think
we
that's
love
the
demonizing
case.
people
And
now.
we don't have
Like what
to-
you said, right? People who think differently than us, monsters. There's
Well,
no gray.
Again, then we start, why do we have the need to other? And it all comes from fear. It all comes from what am I going to, like, am I going to be hurt? If I'm going to be hurt, I'm going to keep you away. These are the people that think like me, let me stay here. And it's almost a primal thing, I
Yeah.
think. But as you were speaking, I don't know if you hate Elizabeth Gilbert as much, but also because I know you don't like my girl Brene. But so in the movie Eat, Pray, Love, did you see it?
No, I tried the book and I just couldn't. It's
The
just not my
movie- I
thing.
actually like the movie maybe more, although I
You
love
know.
City of Girls
In fact,
that Elizabeth
I was
Gilbert
so
wrote.
over things at the end of Maid. I literally went running back to the Blacklist because that's
I
when I
love the
needed.
Blacklist.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, but let me go. So if you have a chance, first of all, Julia Roberts is awesome. Watch Eat, Pray, Love.
I saw it.
There is a scene where she's left her marriage, right? And she's traveling all over the world, kind of finding herself, whatever. She's left her marriage and she has like a flashback of their wedding dance.
Mm.
And apparently at their real wedding, the wrong song had been played or something. And so in her flashback, she's like, oh, this is the song that should have been played. But anyway, so they're dancing and they're talking. And one of the things he says to her, like he doesn't want her to be gone. He doesn't want her to leave. He wants them to be together. And he says, but I love you. And she says, so love me.
Mm.
So you can love someone,
Right.
and it not be. And actually, I think that that's the way to practice.
Yeah, because
that's my goal. Is to
love
be
isn't
able to.
love isn't possessional.
Right.
Just because I love you don't mean I own you or I
Right.
should possess you.
Exactly. It also doesn't mean I have to be with you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we can create and protect safe boundaries for ourselves and still love that person and still not make that person a monster. And I think that is one of the things that I would think would be a step towards a solution. Because what happens when you make the other person into a monster? Has it ever worked
Right.
to tell somebody they are a scumbag or
Right. No.
piece of crap? What does that make that person do?
Yeah.
They just
Dig in
respond
their
with
heels.
aggressiveness, defensiveness, and that's not where we need to come
Mm-hmm.
from. I think that we need to come from, and I'm not trying to be all,
Woo
too
woo.
soft and woo woo and whatever. I'm just actually human behavior.
Right.
We don't respond with growth to shame. If we are shamed, that does not prompt us to grow. I believe that, and it's not even your responsibility to do anything at all other than to keep yourself safe and remove yourself. But also, if you cultivate a love or a sense, or if you already have that and you can keep it intact and still keep the positive feelings and maintain yourself safe,
Mhm.
that would ultimately be the way to go. And then not have to victimize that other person or not victimize, but name that
Demonize.
other person, demonize that other person, because by doing so, you're not helping them to break that cycle.
That's true. And I feel like we had touched on shame a few weeks ago. Maybe. I do think.
Is this salsa, excuse me, from Trader Joe's?
No, it's from Living Green.
No.
Is it good?
It's good.
I feel like there is a place for shame societally.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not one-on-one, but
What do you
societally.
mean? That there's
So-
a place for it, that,
so
that
there
we
are
should
certain-
use shame?
Yes, there are certain things that I've done that.
But we talked
Let's
about
say-
this with your mom, and
Right,
you
my
were
mom
so
is going right back to
ashamed,
that.
and
Yes.
but I can't. It's so important. I think that
I'm gonna try this.
I think that was probably in you, but
Possibly.
without having
Maybe I
to be
would've responded
shamed
differently.
into it.
No, it wasn't in me, or I wouldn't have done that.
No, that's not true. You had to learn,
Hmm.
and you could have learned potentially in a different way. I mean, shame wasn't the only way, and I think that that's what you're thinking that.
Oh, no, I don't think it's
maybe
the only way.
we're gonna. I don't think it's the only way.
I
think-
agree with you, but I don't know. Just like anything else, I think that everyone is motivated by. People are motivated by different things, and I think that throwing out an entire category of motivation is not necessarily good. Like maybe I only responded to shame. Maybe you only responded to kindness. Maybe, you know what I'm saying? I think we're all different. And I think part of our issue today with baby with bathwater is we just decide that a thing is bad whole cloth and we throw it out the window. And that concerns me. And I think we're very quick, especially
We're in
the
cancel
internet.
culture.
We are totally in cancel culture. And
I don't even know how you cancel somebody.
right?
Like, you know, just the idea of that being the society that we're in really needs. I think that needs to be a wake up call to who we are, because how do you counsel a human being?
Yes. Well, and that goes back to
Because
you're
they're
a
not
human being.
seeing them as a human being, they're seeing
Yes,
them
I was just
as
gonna-
a
exactly.
symbol, or they're seeing them as something else. But okay, so let's take that shame example again. Because there are certain things that I think, I'm gonna say, I don't want. Let's not say it's bad or good, but I don't want shame. I
It is
don't.
good.
But there is a difference between shaming Dawn as a human being. You, Dawn, are worthless. You are a terrible human being because you did this. Or, Dawn, you are maybe not even saying, but Dawn, you are awesome, but what you did.
Right.
So
Your behavior
separating
is
the
shameful.
behavior,
Yes,
but-
that I totally get.
But people so many times don't make that connection,
Agreed.
and not everybody is
Agreed.
is.
Well, what is it? Hate
I mean,
the
some
sinner,
people are more
not
in
the
hate the sin,
not
not
the
the
sinner.
sinner. But not everybody is as resilient
Right.
as you are, and or is introspective. They just immediately assume that they're being shamed. That means they're
They're a bad
a
person,
bad human being.
which I find
So
fascinating.
I think that they've maybe a place, but I don't see it. But I think that there are other tools that we can use to get more quickly to our destination.
Yeah, and I don't know about that, and I think that, and this is the curmudgeon in me, I don't think, well, no, I can't say that. I was gonna say our society has never behaved this badly, but that's totally not true. And I read a really interesting piece recently that we do need to stop saying how terrible everything is, because it's actually better than it's ever been. It's not great. We still have a long way to go, but we need to stop trying to convince people that nothing's ever been this bad, because if you look back in history, it was so much worse so many times. And that's absolutely true. And I used to say to people all the time, like, I'm alternately comforted and appalled by where we are compared to 100 years ago, right? Because what went on,
we've lost some stuff and we've gained some stuff.
exactly, which is probably just the nature of humanity.
Right.
But I think part of the issue now, okay, so Emma, this is a prime example of what I think of as like softness that leads to a lack of resilience. So last week she had a sore throat, right? She's 8 years old. And my daughter's a nurse, and she picked her up from school. She can go to school. Went to the urgent care or the pediatrician or whatever and said, she has a sore throat. She has nothing else. I'm pretty sure it's strep. Now we're going to do a COVID test. And I was like, okay, I don't want her to have that because Emma hates whatever. But she needs a strep test. She is presenting with symptoms of strep. And what I didn't know until I had kids was the consequences of untreated strep are really bad. I had no idea. They can be lifelong consequences. So anyway, they refused to do the strep test first because everything's COVID. It's all COVID all the time.
Of course.
So they do the COVID test, and Emma is in such a state that they're struggling to give her the strep test, which is what she really needed. And they said, we're not going to do the strep test because we don't want to further traumatize her. And I'm like, dude, she is 8 years old. She will get that goddamn strep test before we leave here because that is what she needs.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, what they're teaching her is have a big enough tantrum and you will get your way. And that is not good. And that's where I think the pendulum has swung too far in that direction, where we so don't want to upset people that we let them just have tantrums. That's not okay.
Well, we're in a consumer-based America here, so what's outdated is that the customer's always right. Because
Yes.
we've seen.
Right, and she's not a customer. She's an 8-year-old
Oh,
kid.
no. Because hospitals, when I went to have my baby,
Mhm.
and I can remember I was getting the epidural and the anesthesiologist, the nurse was there,
Mhm.
and he said something. He was like, "You're
Emmenthal.
he says you're He was talking to the nurse. He was like, "You're making me do something in front of our customer." And he said it
You're like, I'm not a
he
customer.
said it a couple times, and then I'm like, "Why do you keep saying customer?" So it's come hospital policy now. There are no longer patients; they're customers.
Oh. So they think that's gonna make them treat you better.
Oh dear Lord.
But
then
I don't
when
wanna
you-
be a customer at a hospital. I wanna be a
I'm
freaking
telling
patient.
you, that's
Oh,
what.
let me get an appendectomy today. Let me see, what's your menu of services?
Right, can I take one column A, two column B? Like, whoa. It is a misguided attempt to humanize, again, to not see people as other, but that, ooh, gross. So what did you say anything back?
No, I was by that time the drugs had not kicked in. I didn't care. But I will say that I think we live in a world where experience is the best teacher, and as much as we can try to tell someone, and even our kids, we teach them, the experience is always the best teacher. And we don't want people to experience certain things. Like I wouldn't wish domestic violence on anybody.
Mm-mm.
But if there is a block there for you in understanding that, then experience is all I can tell, because there's no way I can. You can say what you would have done. You could have said it. It is very
Nobody knows.
easy to put ourselves in a position of what we would and wouldn't do in any situation. Not just domestic violence. It's domestic violence, a marriage, kids, your job, whatever. We are all in situations where it is easy to say what you would do because you're not experienced.
Right.
Well, it's funny you said, so I think maybe we had touched on this previously, Barbara Ehrenreich and Nickel and Dime, right, which is one of my favorite. That is a nonfiction book that I read, broke my rule. She's a journalist and an author, and she leaves home for a year, and maybe she brought her car, maybe she didn't, I can't remember, but let's assume she brought her car for the sake of argument. She brought nothing else with her and spent 1 year traveling throughout this country, taking minimum wage jobs and living on what she made, to understand, to walk in the shoes of the people who do this.
Mhm.
And it's a fascinating book and what, transpires, because again, she was like, if I'm really gonna understand this, I have to do it.
Mhm.
So maybe 2 years ago now, 3, I don't remember, but her daughter, who is a lawyer, something like that, was very disturbed. She lives in DC or right outside DC, by what she was seeing in the police department.
Mhm.
And so DC has this program where you can be like a volunteer, like not a COP program like we have here, but you're actually like a pretend cop, like you're in the car with the cops or whatever, some extensive training. And so she decided, I'm going to do that because I want to really understand what it is like to be that officer. And so her mother was like, I can't believe you're going to do this. You're putting yourself in danger. And she took her mother and she's like, Mom, like you lived in BFE and worked for Walmart with nothing to support you. This is like, I got this from you. And so what fascinated me was she talked about the training they get and how hard it is to treat people. So you're taught to, well, at least in DC in the program she was in, right? Which she goes through like the regular police training. You are taught to have compassion while never forgetting that the person across from you could kill you at any moment. And she said, this is very hard. So for example, she said, we go interview a domestic violence victim. And we've all read, right? Those are the calls that cops hate to go on because so often the victim turns on them. So she said, you're in this woman's apartment. She's obviously been like beat up. But you also have to remember in the back of your mind that she could have a weapon under that couch cushion that she's sitting on. And so it makes it very hard to just be compassionate while you're also thinking, I better make sure she doesn't pull a weapon out of that couch cushion. Which fascinated me. But I do think, going back to what Sarika said, a big part of the issue is we think we know how we would act in every situation, even if we've never been in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes back to the othering and the judgmental, and none of us have any idea how we would react to something unless we were in it.
And even so, okay, so, I just posted something yesterday, or the day before about loving people where they are.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know. I mean, I could go and put myself in whatever situation, but the truth is, I don't need to cut off my arm to understand and it's not that I'll ever understand because that's your experience, but I don't need to cut off my arm just so I can, try to see. No, we need to know that everybody is having a hard time and everybody is making the best choices that they can, and we don't have all of the information. We don't have all their variables.
But we just remind yourself, right?
We don't.
We
This
don't.
is
No,
why
you're
we
right.
don't-
That's what you're both saying. We don't need it.
And that's my point is instead of judging, loving people where they are, allowing people to be wherever they are. If somebody asks for a piece of advice, maybe, then that's okay. But our constant need, especially as women, to try to fix, to try to help, to try to that.
And we're not even being asked.
But there's
Oh,
and there's
No,
part
we're
of
just
that-
jumping right in.
And then there's part of that gives the message you need to be fixed,
Mm-hmm.
or something's
Or
wrong with
wrong
you.
with you.
Yes.
Something's wrong with you.
I know better.
I know better, but my point is, I couldn't possibly ever know what it's like. So she went and she was on welfare or went through minimum wage for a year, but she wasn't raised that way. So you're never gonna replicate someone else's experience.
That's true,
You're
but
never
I did.
gonna have the same intelligence, the same looks, the same.
I think
I mean,
what she
it's
did
just-
more so was for awareness,
I get
but
that.
it's not
It's not the
complete
same,
understanding.
but I appreciate her doing that. It's not
Right.
like Studs Terkel and working, right?
Right.
It's a window into that life.
I get it, as long as she doesn't use it as a weapon. Because
No.
sometimes you can use things,
Right.
I've been there and I did
Yeah, no,
this.
and her whole premise
And
was
so,
until you've lived in a by the day motel and not had enough food. I wanted, and she very open in the beginning that look, I had a failsafe, I had a backstop, I had a good education, I had all that.
right,
But it helped her understand just a little bit better
right.
what that's like.
And
And that I think is good, but I think you're right. I think the issue is we need to be content to leave it at the door. I'm not you. I will never know what it's like to be you. And I support you because you are the only one who is you.
and you are a human being
Yes.
who is here learning whatever it is that you need to learn. And if I can give you some grace along the way,
Right.
then that's my job. Some
Mhm.
space to be exactly where you
And
are.
we're
That's my job,
terrible
but
at that.
not let me fix it. Let me do. I want to be here. I want to be here for
although
you.
I did want to
you
fix the maid. I did. I had a terrible
Well,
I
I'm
mean,
not
we
saying
all-
that we don't. And
the
hello, I'm
desire-
not perfect. I want to fix things too. I want to try to make things better. But I'm just saying I don't know that ultimately that's the most productive.
Mhm.
The most productive.
Well, there's an arrogance in it too.
There is.
In the I know better.
There is an arrogance in it. That is correct. I think we get lost sometimes really in just trying to not let people get out of their own way on their own and having faith that they will eventually get there. And it doesn't come from a bad place. It doesn't. I mean, we wanted to help.
sometimes.
We sit there on the and watch the girl and want to, guide her. But honestly, she has to find a way. And you know what? She did a great job.
She did. I wish for her own sake, right? That she didn't have to be so hard, but what are you gonna do? She persevered. But I think going back to, I think the issue is right now, and I think social media is a big part of this. We don't even consider that a lot of people, they're not even coming from a position of I wanna help. They're coming from a position
I know better.
right, I know better, therefore I am a superior human being. And it's just, it's maddening.
I think what has to happen is, I'm pretty sure we all sit and talk about the things that we went through. I'd be like, really? Huh? Strong person. And I think about everything that I've been through, and I'm always amazed at, for me, God's protection over me, because I've done some dumb shit.
Oh my God, I think about that all the time. How did I survive that? And thank you, God.
And
Yeah.
and because of that, my own stupidity, because of my own choices of either knowing better and just not doing better, or either not knowing better so I didn't know how to do better. But even now, being aware of those things gives me so much grace for people, because I don't have to look at nobody else to know shit happens. Like, that's just me. I'm not making this be about what Oprah went through. I don't have to go listen to nobody to talk about their life struggles and overcoming and going through and doing. I don't have to do it. All I have to do is remember what I've been through myself. That alone keeps me out of the seat of judgment. I have no room to judge. And I think we all have to be mindful of that, because, today, especially, that's the conversation I have a lot with a lot of my elders is, we got cameras. Y'all didn't have any. And as much as we see that as like a blessing, it was a blessing for you that you didn't have it.
So I am so grateful I didn't grow up today.
Yeah. So it's
right?
All of it is
so hard.
Their times are changing, and they must change. And because they're changing, our way of thinking has to change along with it, because I'm not going to be able to hold a 19-year-old in today's society to the standards of a 19-year-old from the 1960s. They was dealing with something much, much different. While they were still dealing with stuff, their pressures and things that they're different.
I love that.
It doesn't make their childhood or them being 19 better or worse. It's different.
I love that. And you know what that reminds me of is this, and to me it goes along with the whole cancel culture thing, right? Judging people who lived 400 years ago, like Shakespeare, by today's standards, which is absurd, in my opinion.
Yeah. If that's the case, we wouldn't read the Bible.
Right. Yeah, there you go.
Oh gosh, oh my God.
There you go.
But yeah, that was
the guy who wrote that.
Right. Well, all of them that wrote that, but and the incest and the marrying the children.
Right. That's a really good point. Yeah.
But there's, I'm thinking this whole time about, what Jesus said of you're judging your neighbor because of the splinter in his eye, and you need to remove the log from your own. And we all do that. We all do that. And I'm sorry, I don't know scripture correctly, but that was the general
that's all we need to know.
The general idea. But yeah, I think that my takeaway, and it's always my takeaway, I don't know why, I just always come back to the same thing, is be kind to each other, love everybody, and that includes you. Keep yourself safe.
But
and you can love the person who has caused you harm. And I could share my stories and explain to you the people that I love, and they've done some pretty crappy things to me. Are they people that I hang out with all the time? They are not. But when I think of them, it serves me to genuinely and authentically not feel anything
but love.
but love.
That's it.
And it doesn't mean I don't get triggered by things or whatever, but my mainstay there is love.
It is the
and
most
grace.
peaceful place.
It is.
It is the most peaceful place.
And again, I want to say I'm not Mother Teresa. Like, I'm not. But I know
No,
I
we
think
just-
I am.
you
I'm
had-
shocked.
You were confused. No, I'm not perfect, but this is my journey and this is my
Right.
objective and this is what I'm trying. This is what I'm trying to do. And we are almost at 12:30,
We are, I
so
wanted to
whoever
say,
has a takeaway.
Yes, no, my takeaway is, what did you say when you came in? Like, we run in here like we're going to church, right?
Yeah.
It is like, literally, I'm
Yeah.
glad you came up with the Church of the Holy Trinity.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I do when I leave church. Like,
Yes.
this is awesome and soul affirming and
Soul serving.
yes, and educational and calming, and it's awesome.
It's a reset for me.
It is a reset.
It's
I
a
leave
reset.
here very different.
It's
All
a
right,
reset.
so we're gonna wrap. It's been an hour.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody. I'm gonna say goodbye
Thank
and
you.
Thank you.
thank you to the tech gods that this worked. See everybody next week. Bye.
That chocolate cheese this time.